Hey guys, welcome back. This is a story about what if Naruto befriended Kurama early. After a life-changing event, Naruto meets Kurama early and they become partners and even good friends. With a better outlook on life, he meets many who want to join him and help achieve their dreams and goals together. Among those friends are many beautiful women. Realize just how important he is to them. Before we start, thank you for all of the support. It really means a lot to me. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and leave a like. You can suggest a Naruto fanfiction with a link in the comments if you want me to read it, and check the description for the creator of this great fanfic and support them for making this fanfic. So let's start. Warning. This story will contain mature language, sexual themes, and graphic depictions of violence and gore. Disclaimer. I do not own Naruto or any of its characters. Chapter 5. The Legacy. 2 days later, in the Hokage's office, in the warm radiance of the rising sun breaking into a certain office this morning, Konohagakure's own third Hokage was found sitting behind his large and ornate desk. Now that things have settled down after Hisashi's unfortunate death, the grumbling old man was being forced to face his greatest enemy, the tall stacks of papers on the desk waiting for him to painstakingly go through. He was a little disappointed that he wasn't going to be reading his copy of the latest installment in his students' Ika series for a while longer. Before long, Hiruzen decided to give his sore writing hand a break and enjoy a mid-morning smoke. As he just got done preparing his long pipe with some new tobacco, the office's door banged open loudly to reveal one blue-eyed and whiskered blonde boy. Holding the pipe still halfway to his slightly open mouth, the old man's eyes followed the young boy's march into the office until he stood ramrod straight in front of the desk. Uzumaki Naruto had an uneasy expression on his face as he was clearly bothered by something. The Hokage, still holding his pipe, was wondering what was wrong when his surrogate grandson suddenly bowed deeply at the hips, surprising him quite a bit. Hokage Jiji, I'm sorry for what I said the other day. It wasn't fair to you, especially after I learned more about what happened. I finally understood this wasn't easy for you, and that you had no choice. He sincerely and regretfully spoke with his head still low. Hiruzen smiled gently as he put his pipe down. It's all right, Naruto-kun. I believe how you feel about this is truly the correct way in my own opinion. I constantly wish that I could protect every single person under my command, and make sure they all got back to their loved ones. He replied gently, before sighing woefully. Unfortunately, there are times where I must risk their lives on missions in order to protect the village as whole. Nothing would make me happier than to see every one of them return relatively unharmed from their missions, and that is the case most days. However, there are some days this did not happen, and that is the part of being a Hokage that I must accept. I don't like it, but it's what I must do in order to ensure the rest of this village's protection and safety. Even so, I shouldn't have said all of these awful things. Naruto insisted as he rose from his bow. The third waved his hand dismissively with a smile to show that there was nothing to forgive in the first place. Well, that's over with. Tell me, how is it going with you lately? I hear you've been attacked by a wayward Hyuga the other day. The old man changed subjects, hoping to prolong his reprieve from the paperwork. Naruto raised an eyebrow. He wasn't sure anyone else other than Hisashi saw that incident, and he was confident the clan head wasn't the type to just go tell anyone about a troublemaking relative. He figured it was those two Anbu guarding him that recounted the scene to this man. Oi, care to tell me why my followers didn't jump in when Neji beat my ass to within an inch of my life? He was about to strike a fatal blow, too. He asked bluntly in an irritated tone. The Hokage had to cough violently after he took a surprised intake of breath at this revelation. I'm sorry about that, but they noticed Hisashi-san coming, so they decided to stay back and let the scene play out. He finally admitted after coughing a few times, before putting on a curious expression. But, how did you know they were there? You never gave any indication of noticing them up until now. Naruto shrugged and just pointed at his nose, then his right ear. I can smell them, and I fall asleep to the sound of their heartbeats nearly every night. I noticed them a year ago or so. He stated matter-of-factly, and the old man was shocked to hear this. Even an Inuzuka would be hard-pressed to sniff out the hidden Anbu. The blonde then smirked. My senses became even better since that night with my tenant, though. Like for example, he turned to point at a spot by the giant bookcase near the office's door. I could smell that guy over there had bacon and eggs for breakfast. He paused to sniff once. Coffee too. Black, I'm guessing. He then turned to point at the office's lone sofa in the back corner. That guy is pretty much dipped in sword cleaning oil. I guess he just likes swords a lot. He deduced before finally turning back to the Hokage and pointed up above at the tiled ceiling. That woman up there used some very fruity smelling shampoo. I guess she thought we're in a tropical area, but I sure as hell don't see any fruit trees around to cover up the smell. He finished. The Hokage sat there, feeling a little dumbstruck and impressed. For a brief moment, he believed this young boy would grow up to be a truly dangerous shinobi, before the apparently male Anbu in the ceiling hopped down to appear at the Hokage's side and cleared his throat. It was clear Naruto mistook him for a woman, and the boy let out a sheepish grin. Sorry Boar-san, I thought you were a woman with that shampoo. No offense, sir. He inclined his head slightly. The boar-masked Anbu just shrugged his shoulders and mumbled something about, had to use my girlfriend's shampoo, before disappearing back into the ceiling. I put a cube of sugar in my black coffee. A man's voice corrected from the hidden spot by the bookshelf. Naruto flinched and turned his head toward the voice. Who uses just one cube? Even I know you put in at least 2 cubes to even notice any change in the taste, and I don't drink coffee yet. He defended. The Hokage gave a brief, it is kinda true, nod with a half shrug at this statement. I'm a woman. A feminine voice called out from the sofa, sounding clearly amused. Naruto comically twirled his head toward the sofa in shock before sighing. Gimme a break, it's not like I've learned to tell the differences between men and women by smell yet. Hiruzen, having watched all of this, shook his head in amusement. Well, this boy will at least be dangerous in the future with more practice, I suppose. The humor was short-lived when he heard something very uncomfortable. Though, you should clean your sword better since I can also smell blood all over you. You must have been fighting someone recently. Naruto innocently offered. The air in the room quickly chilled and cracked as the other men kept stone still, not wanting to make the slightest amount of noise, even breathing. They all knew she hadn't drawn blood from anyone for days. Naruto just cocked his head at the suddenly tense atmosphere. Restroom break. A panicked female voice cried out before a whoosh of air was heard, signifying the unfortunate woman's departure from the office. What the heck just happened? The child inquired as he gazed confusedly at the profusely sweating Hokage. He didn't want to answer that and tried to shrug it off, acting as clueless as the blonde boy. It seemed to work when the boy returned the shrug and apparently moved on to another subject in his mind. The men in the room and a certain fox let out a silent sigh of relief. They definitely did not want to be the ones to tell a naive young child about the messy facts of life, just yet. Taking a moment to clear his throat after that awkward situation, the aged leader spoke up again. So, you didn't answer my question earlier. Is everything okay? Are you doing well with the training so far? He pressed a little, and Naruto smiled broadly. I'm doing great. I'm getting along with Hinata-chan and her dad. They're pretty nice once you get past the stoicism, or in Hinata-chan's case, her shyness. As for the training, the fox is working me hard and fixing up my body. See, he reported as he rolled up one of his t-shirt's sleeves and flexed his bicep, which was already showing some significant improvement from just a week ago. The Hokage nodded in approval. I'm glad to see you're working hard, and I hope you will continue to get along with the Hyugas. They will be very important allies if you remain friends with them. He advised. The blonde nodded in response. I know it's important, but I want real friends. I'm not going to do this just to get favors. He declared. He didn't want to be thought of trying to get on anyone's good side for his own sake. That's an excellent principle to follow. I am sure all of your friends will appreciate this. Nodded the third. Naruto returned the nod with a wide grin and turned to leave. Well, I guess that's all I got to say. The fox is grumbling for me to get back to exercising already, so I'll be going, Hokage Gigi. He waved over his shoulder before exiting. The Hokage smiled and set about getting back to the paperwork when he noticed a difference. Did this stack of papers just increase in size when I wasn't looking? He grumbled, directing a nasty glare at the stack that would have set it on fire if it were possible. A sweat drop formed in the air over by the bookshelf. No, Hokage-sama. It's just your imagination, I think. The invisible Anbu's voice replied without any conviction. Hiruzen sighed wearily and grumbled for a moment with a small smirk, thinking a certain blonde did something. This only lasted until he felt something change in the atmosphere, and his eyes narrowed. He quickly waved his hand in a dismissive gesture. Please step out for a moment. It seems I will be having a rather shy visitor soon. The Anbu quickly obeyed and their presences vanished, all trace of the previous humor gone. After a long moment's silence, the third steepled his hands on the desk as he calmly watched a murder of crows suddenly come into existence out of thin air and flapped around the office for a few seconds, before they all converged toward one spot in front of his desk. With a sharp caw, the crows then melded together into a young raven-haired human male already down on one knee with his head bowed slightly in salutation. His face was the epitome of stoicism. Report. The powerful god of shinobi rumbled with his suddenly ruthless and steely dark eyes locking with a pair of sinister red eyes that displayed 3 black tomos in each iris. Hokage-sama, I bear unfortunate news. The man began in a calm and collected voice. Just outside a blonde boy was snickering mischievously as he went down the tower's stairs. How's that for a quick prank? I managed to sneak in an extra stack of papers when the old man wasn't looking. I would have loved to see the look on his face when he notices they were all requests from random villagers for my face to be engraved into the Hokage monument. Naruto thought while Kurama was chuckling deeply in his head. Not bad, boy. It's not the greatest, but it's good enough. Let's get back to your exercises. The fox ordered as her container began stretching at the bottom of the stairs. Hey, Kurama, I was just thinking on what happened with Hokage Gigi and that woman in the office. Did I say something wrong? He inquired of his tenant who was now sweating nervously and silently cursing his naive curiosity. It's probably nothing. Anyway, your body's not going to get any stronger as long as you're standing here thinking about useless things. Let's go, she urged, hoping he would forget about this subject soon enough. Puzzled, Naruto just shrugged and got on the streets to finish jogging, wondering why adults and a demon fox acted so strange sometimes. Soon in a certain apartment. Mitarashi Anko, a 15-year-old kunoichi who was just promoted to chunin, groggily rubbed the sleep out of her eyes with a loud yawn, before she then stretched her entire body in her bed with a contented groan. She was happy she usually drew the night shifts in most of her duties, since she definitely wasn't a morning person at all. After stretching, she slowly got out from under the blanket revealing a nearly nude body in only a pair of white and purple striped panties. She didn't pay this any mind since it was her preference to sleep that way. She moved over to the closet in her sparsely decorated bedroom. The only personal touches in her room were the 2 framed photos on the nightstand by the bed. One photo was of Anko getting congratulations and hugs from one of her few friends, Yuhi Kurenai, when she was promoted to chunin a few months ago. The other photo was a simple one of her smiling genuinely, which was a rarity for her these days, next to her equally smiling surrogate sister and roommate. The young purple-haired teen finished getting dressed for the day when she put on a tight white t-shirt with a random logo on the front, and a black miniskirt. The shirt did little to hide her still growing breasts, which were a very impressive size for her age. She finished the outfit off with getting her long purple hair done up in the usual fanned ponytail style, and putting the hitai on under her long bangs that almost completely hid it from view. She then moved into the kitchen to quickly eat a breakfast of toast and oatmeal. Afterward, she flopped down on her stomach on the living room couch with a heavy sigh, and let her mind wander for a while. It was 3 years ago when she was rescued from that dank abandoned lab. She still hadn't recovered any of the memories she lost during the 3 years she was supposedly with her old sensei, Orochimaru. Not even the top mind arts user, the Yamanaka clan head Inoichi, was able to help her find any trace of those memories. Afterward, the unfortunate young woman was left to deal with picking up pieces of her life, made difficult by the combination of suddenly skipping 3 years, at least in her mind, into a developing teenage girl's body, and the stigma of having been an apprentice to the village's most hated traitor. Her first experience with that stigma was the continued disgruntlement of the male Anbu escorting her from that abandoned lab to Konoha. Although he did keep silent under strict orders from the other Anbu escort, she easily felt him staring at her with murder and disgust in his eyes. It grew worse when she arrived in the village and news spread that an ex-apprentice of the traitor Orochimaru was in custody. By the time she reached the Torture and Intelligence building, villagers and shinobi were already lining the path screaming insults and throwing debris at her. It took a massive dose of killing intent from the female Anbu escort to finally scare the crowd away. The interrogation was relatively tame because it was already verified by Inoichi that Anko truly did lose her memories and was telling the truth that she had no intention of betraying the village along with her ex-sensei. Yet, this did not keep Morino Ibiki, the head of interrogation, from asking her truly invasive and personal questions. The only good thing from that miserable day was the Hokage himself dropping by and assuring her that he did believe her wholeheartedly, and that if she still wished to enter the shinobi force, she was allowed to do so. That put him number 2 on her list, right behind the female Anbu who rescued her and comforted her on the way back to Konoha. After being allowed out of questioning, she was escorted to an apartment by the same female Anbu that saved her. Upon arriving, the young teen was surprised to find Neko removing her mask, revealing a beautiful and mature-looking young woman with slatted chocolate-brown eyes. Flashback: Anko was rather bewildered by the female Anbu inexplicitly taking her cat mask off in the middle of the living room of the apartment that she was taken to. "Wah, Neko-san." The young preteen managed to blurt out upon seeing her savior's beautiful face framed by long purple hair that seemed just a bit more vibrant in its shine than her own. She swore they shared family blood considering just how similar they looked. "I go by that name when I'm working. Whenever I'm not wearing the mask, you may call me Yugao. Azuki Yugao." The revealed woman smiled gently as she introduced herself. "Okay, Yugao-san, but why did you just reveal yourself?" Anko could not get it in her head that someone was actually nice to her after the last few days of dealing with nothing but anger and misery. "It makes sense for me to officially introduce myself as your new roommate, Anko-chan. I studied your file and I noticed you have no relative to stay with anywhere near here. Considering how the past few days went since you entered this village, I feel you could use someone to help you through this horrible time. I also hope we will come to be good friends someday as well." Yugao offered sincerely. This stunned Anko into silence as she stared at her new roommate wide-eyed for a few long minutes. The 16-year-old Anbu shifted uncomfortably under the stare. Perhaps she was wrong about Anko wanting someone to help her. She almost didn't hear the younger teen's response in her growing internal panic. Thank you. Anko barely whispered as she shuffled over to the older woman, her arms spreading out slowly. As she got closer, tears were beginning to stream down her cheeks like waterfalls. When she finally clutched her new roommate into a crushing hug, she released a loud wail of misery and anguish. The dam finally broke wide open for one Mitarashi Anko as she just let out all the negative emotions she held in over the last few days of hell. Yugao had to hold in a sniffle as she hugged her now proclaimed, "Little sister," back tightly. Her hand then instinctively began raking through the young girl's purple hair gently as Anko continued to sob and wail into her savior's chest for what seemed like eternity. End flashback. That was the last time Anko allowed herself to cry that much. She swore to herself that day that no matter how shitty her life got, she'd never let Orochimaru win by taking the easy way out. She would go out fighting, never letting being tainted get her down, but it was hard to avoid thinking differently many days. Things never got easy for her after that day, even with Yugao's constant support. Countless nights since then were interrupted by extreme pain radiating from the curse mark that Snake Bastard left on her neck, and the horrific nightmares it caused as well. When she enlisted as a genin, her teammates and sensei never let her live down the fact that she was associated with a traitor, and was mocked constantly. It was a miserable 2 years for her, even though she was clearly superior in skills to her teammates and even matched the Junin sensei in some aspects. Things got a little better when she met Yuhi Kurenai from another team. The beautiful raven-haired young woman did not immediately judge her, and they clicked as friends quickly. Kurenai, along with Yugao, did help alleviate some of the pain and misery the young genin felt at the hands of her team. It was only because of these two that she managed to remain sane long enough with her team. Her break finally came when they were nominated for their Chunin exams because her two worthless teammates finally garnered enough meager skills for their arrogant Junin sensei to actually consider them ready. With nothing but pure luck and strategy, she pretty much single-handedly pulled her team into the finals. She was the only one out of 3 to have earned the Chunin rank, thanks to the fact the exam was in Iwagakure and the judges there weren't biased against her past association with Orochimaru. Even then, her own people were going to block her promotion based on drummed-up charges by her former team that she sabotaged her two teammates, somehow. It was only when the Hokage angrily stepped in that Anko was assured of moving up. That endeared him to her even more, and she would only obey him completely out of anyone in this entire military force. It still occasionally took him ordering her to listen to her superiors before she would do her assigned duties properly. Things got a little better for her as a chunin, at least. She still had to deal with her squad mates' prejudice, but it was more manageable for her since it wasn't as personal as it was with her former genin teammates, who still have yet to get promoted last time she heard. The fact that she switched squads often helped to keep anything from going too far. Her life in the village became more manageable as well. The villagers' hatred for her did not disappear, but they were a lot less intense than when she first returned to the village from her rescue. Right now, she merely got open glares and hateful mutterings from everyone, and disgusting leers from some men. She may have been associated with a traitor, but it did not stop men from thinking she was beautiful. Especially with her being an early bloomer. They just automatically decided she was easy because of Orochimaru. She proved them wrong by introducing her foot to their balls. It still didn't stop them from coming back more aggressively, however. She ended up having to be harsher. Some of these times still had her snickering to this day, since they usually ended up with her standing before the Hokage for a reprimand on sending her snakes where the sun definitely did not shine. She swore to herself she'd make it to Junin quickly. That would allow her to work more solo missions, and take command of squads so she could at least keep the prejudiced fools in line. It also would give her a measure of deterrence against most of the village's male population because of how dangerous the rank would have signified her skill level to be. Anko was jolted out of her thoughts by the front door banging open. She glanced up to see her older roommate, 19-year-old Yugao, stumbling into the apartment as if she had been turned into a zombie. The off-duty Anbu slowly unlatched her sword from her back, and removed her mask with a disgruntled growl. She then tossed them onto a chair rather carelessly. At this point, Anko noticed her surrogate sister's downcast expression as the older woman unceremoniously flopped onto a chair at the dining table with her head burrowing into her arms with a groan. Something happened today, Yugao-ne. I thought you got the easy shift this time with guarding the old man, she carefully inquired as she sat herself upright on the sofa, a little worried if something happened to the third. I did get the easy shift. I even got the comfortable spot on the sofa today. All I had to do for the entire morning was to just sit there and be invisible. Yugao mumbled as she raised her head from her arms, her face still downcast and blushing with embarrassment. So, something clearly happened. So, it came early. Yugao vaguely said, expecting her roommate to get the meaning. Anko had to wince in sympathy. It took her a long time to get used to the idea of a girl's body suddenly bleeding and cramping up painfully once every month. That was one of the most jarring effects of her suddenly transitioning from her 9-year-old self to a 12-year-old preteen already beginning puberty when she lost her 3 years of memories. This got her very embarrassing conversations with her surrogate sister about periods, puberty, and sex for many weeks afterward. Not to mention the awkward visits to a specialized medic nin just for checking on her reproductive health. She only just had gotten used to the idea of becoming a woman recently. Ouch. Lose your favorite pair, she wondered, expecting this reason to be why Yugao was depressed. It was not like anyone was going to be able to tell with her dark-colored Anbu-style pants. No. That's probably the only good thing from this. I didn't lose any pair because I was told just when it began. The older woman vaguely said, still looking depressed. Oh, I guess that's fine. Wait, what did you say? You were told. Anko's eyebrows shot up in amazed incredulity. Yes, Anko-chan, I was told that I just started my period. Yugao was now trembling. By this 8-year-old blonde boy with a better sense of smell than the entire Inuzuka clan. Right there. In the goddamn Hokage's office. With the freaking Hokage and 2 of my comrades within earshot in the same fucking room, she cried out pitifully before slamming her head back into her arms on the table. So now 3 people aside from Hayate-kun know my cycle. She mumbled dully from her arms before perking back up with an irritated expression. If Hokage-sama assigns me easy missions this time next month, out of concern for me, I'm going to stab him repeatedly with my sword, I swear to Kami. The purple-haired Anbu growled. Despite her roommate's misery, Anko had to stifle a chuckle. It wasn't like the usually composed Yugao to go off the handle. So how did the brat look after you've sliced him into pieces for his offense, she teased. Yugao raised an eyebrow at her roommate's assumption that she would do something like that. I didn't do anything to him. Besides, he had no idea what he was saying. He thought I was fighting someone and suggested I clean up because he smelled the blood. She grumbled with a shudder at the last word. Anko winced, wondering just how that particular and perfectly natural body function smelled to any sensitive nose. He's an adorable and naive little boy with those whisker marks on his cheeks and beautiful blue eyes. I could never stay mad at him even if I tried. She admitted with a small smile before sighing dejectedly. I'll be okay, I'll probably forget about all this after a week. It just was embarrassing today, that's all. Anko raised an eyebrow at her surrogate sister's impression of the boy. Yugao generally didn't care for kids because she considered them brats, and did not intend to have any kid of her own for a long time. If she ever got around to it, that is. This kid must have been someone special to endear himself to Yugao rather easily. Who's this kid then? Must have been super skilled or high-class VIP if he can just barge into the old man's office. She asked offhandedly. Yugao smiled at her roommate's curiosity. No, just a kid that Hokage-sama considers to be his surrogate grandson. His name's Uzumaki Naruto, and I can tell he will grow up to be a very interesting, and probably amazing, shinobi. It's almost too bad he's not close to your age, at least for the time being. You two would get along great when he becomes older and more mature. Hell, despite his naivety, he's mature beyond his age. Yugao sadly said, knowing exactly the reason why he had to grow up so quickly. Really? What kind of history did he have? Anko inquired, but her roommate shook her head soberly. Sorry, Anko-chan. I trust you, but that's a S-class secret that only Junin and Anbu are allowed to know. You'll just have to hurry up and get promoted to understand everything about Naruto. She replied mysteriously. Even though Anko had on an impatient scowl, she just shrugged this off and got up to put on her black kunoichi sandals. Sorry to hear about your morning, Yugao-ne. I'll leave you alone to wallow in your humiliation while I go out to kill time. She declared with a teasing grin. Yugao just stuck her tongue out at her roommate before returning her head to rest on the table with a groan. Anko chortled briefly as she stepped out the front door. Naruto on a random street in the village. Naruto was panting heavily as he continued to run at a quick pace up the street. He was already used to the open glares from the people on the street, so they didn't even register. However, with his superior hearing, he could hardly ignore the whispering about the demon brat. Some of the things he heard almost made him stumble over in exasperation at their idiocy, like how he was training to get stronger so he could destroy the village. That they were somewhat cowering while muttering that they needed to hurry up and kill him quickly, almost made him laugh. However, he was encouraged to hear some positive comments from some of the younger people, like how he saved the Hyuga Hiresen. Would a demon have done that? They also began to notice how he still remained cordial to them despite being openly shunned. He had to smile. Hearing just one of these positive comments made it worth hearing 1,000 insults from the others. He was so distracted by his happy thoughts that he did not notice someone standing in his way. He slammed into the person's leg hard and bounced back onto his back on the hard ground with a pained grunt. Before he could apologize, a large man's hand suddenly grabbed onto the boy's collar and lifted him up harshly. Naruto let out a yelp of discomfort and opened his eyes to stare into the hateful glare of a large male villager. Naruto knew this man as one of those villagers that were most vocal and aggressive against his continued existence. How dare you try to hurt me, you damn demon brat! The man hissed harshly. The boy knew he was in for it, but he had to try to calm the man down. He put both hands up in a placating gesture. I'm sorry. I wasn't watching where I was going. I was just jogging. He tried to say calmly. The man just shook the boy hard for a few seconds. Don't think you can trick me with that nice act. I know you're secretly training to destroy this village in the future. Well, I'm going to do everyone here a favor and put an end to that right now. The man declared to the other villagers gathering around him as he drew out a long knife from his belt. The villagers gasped and some of them cheered. I'm going to make you suffer, the man whispered darkly as he moved the tip of the knife to the blonde's face. Naruto had no choice but to close his eyes with gritted teeth, and just hope that Kurama, who was already roaring angrily at the man in his head, would help him survive this until someone interfered. He was still too weak to even defend himself against a villager. However, he never had the chance to test his quick recovery ability once again as he heard a yelp of pain, and he was suddenly dropped. Landing hard on his butt, he cried out at this sudden action as he opened his eyes. He was surprised to see a beautiful purple-haired teenage girl with pupil-less light brown eyes gripping the large man's knife hand in place as if it was nothing. Mitarashi Anko glared harshly up at the nervous man, who stared at the young girl fearfully before his face began to grimace in pain as the girl tightened her grip on the man's hand. Naruto could hear the slight cracking of bones in the man's hand for a second until he heard a cry of pain. At the sound, the young girl finally let go and the man stumbled back clumsily, dropping the knife in the process. Clutching at the fractured hand with a pained grimace, the man glared balefully at the purple-haired girl. You fucking bitch. Of course a traitor's whore would protect the demon brat. The man spat out, only to wilt under Anko's glare and her rather impressive killing intent. You'd better get it into your idiotic brain if you know what's good for you, and the same goes for all of you. Anko swept her arm out to indicate the other villagers surrounding them. I'm a kunoichi of this village and my job is to do what I think need to be done to keep the peace and protect its people. I just saw a cute little boy being harassed and about to be cut up by a pathetic retard that seemed to think he was out to destroy the entire village. The purple-haired girl laughed mirthlessly for a few seconds before pointing at the large man. You'd have been more of a danger to this village than this boy could ever be if stupidity is actually contagious. In fact, I should probably lock you up anyway for public safety. She spoke with a malicious grin that sent shivers down everyone's spines. After a moment of holding that expression, she then let out a suffering sigh. I really don't need to deal with this crap, so, get the hell out of here before I set my snakes on you. And that goes for all of you too. She raged while sending her killing intent everywhere, terrifying everyone around her. In the next instant, it was just the blonde boy and her alone on the street. Whoa, Naruto muttered in amazement. The teenage girl turned around and gave a silly victory hand gesture before bending down to offer her hand for the blonde to grab onto. The boy gladly took the proffered hand. Thanks, Oni-san. You saved me, he said gratefully upon getting to his feet. Anko could only grin cockily and rubbed a finger under her nose. It's no biggie. I don't know why they'd think you're going to destroy the village. You're pretty cute, especially with those whiskers. She teased as she bent over to pinch and stretch one of the boy's cheeks. Naruto could only cry out in indignity as he swatted the hand away. The girl then narrowed her eyes as if she realized something. Wait a minute, blonde, whiskers, and gorgeous blue eyes, are you Uzumaki Naruto? She suddenly asked. Naruto flinched in surprise. Why yeah, I am. How did you know that, Oni-san? The boy cocked his head in confusion. I heard it from a little purple cat. Did you know you embarrassed a young woman this morning, Gaki? Anko pointed out, and then smirked upon seeing the blonde looking seriously affronted. No way. I didn't do anything to any woman on purpose. The boy huffed with crossed arms, thinking someone else out there was slandering his good name. Nah, it's all right. You didn't realize. However, I have a piece of advice for you, and it's very imperative you listen to this, Gaki. Anko leaned in to speak in a low voice. Naruto, putting on a curious fox-like expression, brought one of his ears in close. Gaki, I hear you have that great sense of smell, and it's pretty useful, I'm sure. However, in the future, if you ever smell any kind of blood on a woman and she doesn't look like she's bleeding from anywhere visible, it's probably very important for your sake that you do not bring it up with her out of nowhere, especially with people around. The teen whispered vaguely, confusing the boy even more. Something like that happened this morning, but I don't understand, Oni-san. If I smell blood, that means someone's hurt and bleeding, right? Naruto tried to press for clarification. The older girl quickly shushed him. In a way, you might be right about us occasionally hurting. However, it's extremely personal for all women. I'm doing you a huge favor by asking you to just ignore that scent and don't ever mention it. Don't even think about it. You were lucky the woman this morning didn't cut you up out of anger. The girl warned sternly with a serious expression. Naruto cocked his head with squinted fox-like eyes in bewilderment. Yugao Ni's right, he is so adorable. She squealed in her mind. Even though I'm now smelling it mixed with snakes on you, Oni-san, the blonde innocently dropped the bombshell. A cold chill went down Anko's spine as her pupils shrank in shock. She didn't even note the fact he smelled snakes on her as well. Excuse me for a moment. And stay here, Gaki. She mechanically spoke as she straightened up and walked awkwardly into a nearby alley to hide herself from anyone's sight. A long moment of silence followed for the very confused young boy before an enraged yell exploded from the alley, scaring him into falling on his backside again. God fucking damn it, these were my favorite. Naruto was trembling with wide eyes at the girl's sudden temper. Another long moment of silence followed before he saw the teenage girl emerge from the alley, her eyes closed and cheeks bright red with embarrassment. Anko purposely walked right up to the boy and bent down at her hips, looming dangerously over the terrified boy. Yes, Gaki, don't even mention it to me from now on whenever we meet again in the future. She slowly ground out with one of her eyes twitching and her cheeks still bright red. Oh okay, I won't say anything about this to any woman ever, Oni-san. Naruto promised frantically. He wondered what the hell was going on, but if this was a big deal for women, he decided he should leave this to them from now on. He had a feeling he'd be better off this way anyway. Very good. Now, I want to go home, change, and get some dango, so I'll see you around the village once in a while, okay? Anko chirped in fake cheerfulness with a strained smile before turning around to walk off, dejectedly waving goodbye over her shoulder. Naruto, even though he was still confused, waved back anyway. Okay, this is too much trouble for me. I'm never going to bring that up with any girl from now on, he sighed as he thought this to his tenant. Good, because that would save your life, and mine by proxy, from enraged and irrational human females. The fox replied with clear relief, glad this subject was closed for good, at least for a few more years. The naive young boy shrugged before he began stretching his legs a bit to continue his run. Some weeks later in Naruto's apartment, Naruto entered his apartment, still lightly panting from his latest round of exercises, 20 laps around the village with 3 sets of 100 crunches, sit-ups, and squats every 4 laps. He then ended it all with 4 sets of 20 pull-ups and 10 100 meters dashes to get his blood really pumping before cooling down on his walk home. Wow, I keep saying this, but you really work fast. I know I'd have died if I did all of that just 2 weeks ago. Naruto spoke internally as he poked at some of the hardening muscles on his body. I'd be lying if I said I expected you to reach this point already. At this rate, I might be finished bringing your body up to appropriate levels in just a couple weeks, much earlier than I anticipated. Kurama admitted. She wondered if it was the elite blood of those 2 clans in him that allowed him to adapt and mold his body so quickly for anything. In any case, this amount of exercising is more than enough to get you into shape quickly, so we'll keep the routine the same until we move on to the next level of your training. She suggested. Naruto nodded as he took his sweat-drenched t-shirt off and began preparing some lunch. This time it was a sub-sandwich packed with meat and vegetables to give him plenty of protein and nutrition. While the boy was eating, Kurama was deep in her thoughts about how best to reveal some important information to her container. She knew he wasn't going to be happy, but she felt it needed to be done. Just as the young blonde finished his delicious lunch, he heard a somehow timid-sounding knocking at the front door. Naruto frowned in confusion since he wasn't expecting any guest. He went up to the door to open it slowly, and then smiled broadly. Hinata-chan. How are you? What are you doing here? He greeted cheerfully to a cute indigo-hair girl standing stock-still in a purple kimono. She was holding a small and cute pink drawstring purse that had a white floral pattern. Her lavender eyes were wide open in shock because she was seeing her young friend standing in front of her totally shirtless. Her cheeks quickly became inflamed with embarrassment. She had never seen any male, even her father, topless or beyond. For some reason, she thought Naruto looked fantastic with his developing muscles. One would hardly think the young blonde's body looked like a normal 8-year-old boy's. She had to turn away from the confused boy lest she'd have fainted from shock and embarrassment. Anyo, I'm sorry Naruto-kun, BB but see could YUP put a shirt on, please, the girl stuttered worse than ever at this moment, though she felt somewhat disappointed at having to ask him to do this. The boy cocked his head and squinted fox-like in confusion, and then glanced down before snapping his head up with his blue eyes wide in surprise. He then quickly retreated back into the apartment. After a moment of awkward waiting for the young Hyuga, Naruto finally came back with a clean shirt on and an embarrassed smile. Hehe, sorry that was rude of me, Hinata-chan. I forgot I took it off when I got back from my morning routine. Anyway, how are you? How did you find your way here? He asked sheepishly of his new guest. Hinata fidgeted nervously and began poking her 2 index fingers together. I apologize for coming here you unannounced. But after the TT terrible event the other day and we haven't heard from you since beforehand, I wanted to check if you were all right. I asked father to allow me to visit you, and he approved. He then had one of RG guards escort me here. He's outside. She explained haltingly. Naruto was not too surprised that a powerful man like Hiyashi knew his address. That, and it wasn't like the demon brat's address was a secret in the village anyway. He wondered about the terrible event, though. Does this event have something to do with the Uchiha massacre I heard about? He deduced. Hinata responded with a quick nod of her head. Yes. It's terrible how it just happened out of nowhere, and Uchiha Itachi left only one boy our age alive. Why you live only a short distance from the Uchiha district, and I was worried. She trailed off, her cheek growing red again. Naruto smiled gently at his new friend's caring nature. As you can see, Hinata-chan, I'm alright. How about this, let's go for a quick walk. I want to check out the district, if that's okay with you, he suggested. Hinata put on a small smile and nodded slightly, happy to be doing something with her new friend. The blonde quickly slipped his sandals on before closing the door. Alright, let's get going, he declared, but not before turning to a seemingly empty space next to the door and inclined his head slightly. Good work, Anbu-san. He chirped cheekily, and Hinata followed suit and bowed to a different spot on the other side of the door. Anyo, please take care of us, Anbu-san. She spoke very politely, not even registering the fact that there were 2 Anbu guarding Naruto for some reason. 2 huge sweat drops formed in the air out of nowhere as the 2 children walked down the stairs out of the building. Those fucking nose and eyes, how can we even hide from them at all, Sparrow, grumbled a male voice in the spot to which Naruto acknowledged. At least the brats aren't making it difficult for us, Lizard. Another voice, this one female, muttered dejectedly as the 2 masked Anbu appeared out of thin air and jumped to the rooftops, preparing to follow their charge. Back on the streets with the children, they were walking shoulder by shoulder toward the Uchiha district as a Hyuga escort followed a fair distance behind them, keeping his pale eyes moving around for any sign of trouble. The escort also discreetly nodded his head at the 2 Anbu he saw with his Byakugan up on the roof. They returned the gesture. Hinata could tell something was wrong. She noticed nasty glares directed at her, no, only at the blonde next to her. This confused her greatly. Did he do something to upset the village with a prank gone too far? Even as she thought that, she knew that wasn't the case. She could tell the glares of disgust and hatred she saw from the villagers went far beyond that. Growing angry at this blatant lack of respect toward her friend, she glanced at the blonde next to her, expecting him to be bothered by the glares and returning them defiantly. Much to her surprise, he wasn't doing anything. He was being deliberately oblivious to this treatment, and she wondered why her usually straightforward and brave friend was letting this pass by without raising a stink. She could only deduce that those villagers had been doing this for so long that he simply had grown used to this, and it now became a habit to ignore all this. How can this be? Why would a kind person like Naruto-kun get this kind of treatment? She thought in despair for her friend. Naruto, as if reading her mind, turned his head toward her and shot her an assuring smile. Don't worry, Hinata-chan. They're just being petty and pissed about something I had no control over a long time ago. He explained calmly, with that smile still on his face. The Hyuga heiress could tell it was forced for her sake. She wouldn't even return the smile as she glared down at the ground. Naruto-kun, can you tell? Her question was interrupted by her friend's loud voice. All right. We're here, he quickly declared as he sped off toward an unique-looking gate allowing access to a certain part of Konoha. Hinata sighed in defeat. She knew that he interrupted on purpose just now, and decided she would have to wait on that question for later. She caught up with the blonde who was staring in through a large closed iron gate into the Uchiha district. The entire area in front of the 2 children was eerily quiet, and it definitely didn't feel right. A place large should at least have had loud noises and countless signs of busy activity at this time of the day. Right now, there was absolutely nothing that told these two children that an entire clan was even living here before the terrible event. The empty streets and buildings were sparkling clean, as if they had to be scrubbed down for a reason. The two children had to swallow at the implication of that notion. I see you two have decided to satisfy your curiosity about the tragic event here. A calm voice spoke up smoothly from behind Naruto and Hinata. They twirled around to face Hyuga Hiyashi gazing down at them in his usual clan head's robes. Father. Hinata jumped at the sight of her father. Hiyashi-sama, what brings you this way on this day? Naruto bowed slightly. Hiyashi returned the polite bow. I was walking this way toward home from a meeting with Hokage-sama. I happened to see you, and decided I would collect my daughter for the trip home. Hiyashi spoke with a nod to the Hyuga escort, allowing the man to leave on his own for the clan compound, now relieved by the clan head. Father. Hinata trailed off sadly at her father's implication that she was to go home with him soon. Naruto smiled and scratched the back of his head. Don't worry, Hinata-chan. I was going to have you go home after this. I have something I need to do today, he assured. Hinata could only nod in disappointment. But man, this is really weird. I wasn't particularly liked by the Uchiha clan, but it's just strange to see an entire district with absolutely no life in it all of a sudden. Naruto murmured to no one in particular as he turned back to face the blocked gate. I wonder if it could have been avoided. Hiyashi mysteriously whispered, and the blonde caught that. Hiyashi-sama. My apologies, but I should not speak ill of the dead, even though my clan and the Uchiha clan were rivals, up until recently. The clan head said carefully. Naruto nodded his head, respecting the man's desire to not speak any more of this. I am afraid my daughter and I will need to take our leave. I hope to see you soon again before long, Uzumaki-san. Hiyashi and Hinata bowed their goodbyes before heading off toward the compound, leaving behind a waving Naruto. Alright, Kurama, they're gone. Why do you want me to ditch Hinata-chan all of a sudden? Naruto quizzed his tenant. Because there's something we need to discuss and I'd rather that child don't get in the way of that. The demon fox replied bluntly. Sounds pretty serious. Naruto thought offhandedly as he continued to stare into the empty district. Oi, Fox, how do you feel about this? I know you got some strife against people with these Sharingan. He wondered, and Kurama let out a scoff. They had it coming. This clan was cursed, destined to be exterminated one day. It was only just a matter of when, since the very first day the clan formed. It was rare to see any Uchiha that is different from the two main types I've observed. The first type are the ones that grew arrogant and complacent with their eyes, and relied on them so much they easily got killed in battle early in their lives. The other type desire power so much they would do anything possible to gain an upper hand. I'd keep an eye on that Uchiha brat who survived this. I'd bet he will look for power anywhere possible for revenge against the one who did this, and he might not hesitate to get rid of those that get in his way. The fox warned, and Naruto nodded his head soberly. Let's go. I'm done looking at this disgusting reminder of that accursed clan. We need to get to the training field the old fart gave us. She finished dismissively. Her host nodded in the affirmative before making his way toward Konoha's training fields. Hiyashi and Hinata, heading home. Father, Hinata quietly called out, catching her father's attention. Hiyashi slightly turned his head to imply he was listening as they continued their walk. When I was walking with Naruto-kun, I have discovered that he deals with looks of hate and disgust from the villagers all around us. They look similar to what I am getting in the compound, only it was much worse for Naruto-kun. I cannot believe he is someone that has done something to deserve the entire village hating him so much. Am I wrong? Hinata spoke seriously, all traces of her stuttering and low confidence gone. She was gazing up at her father with quiet anger in her pale eyes for the villagers. Hiyashi had to admit inwardly he was growing prouder of his daughter with each passing day. I have said once before that this is Uzumaki-san's secret to tell you. But I shall assure you now that it was not his fault. Do not fret too much for that child because he is much stronger than you realize. He is going out to prove to the entire village that he is not the person they think him to be. Just like you are trying to prove to our clan that you deserve to be considered for the position of the clan head in the future. He spoke evenly as they approached the compound's gate. Hinata nodded in understanding, though she was still rather upset with the villagers. Someday, she'd find out this was about, and then she would make sure to assure her friends she was never going to be one of these people ever. Training field number 42, so this is the training field I'm to use for the next 5 years or so. Naruto announced to no one in particular as he walked up to the center of a large clearing in the middle of a dense forest. He could make out a large and deep ravine cutting through the earth at the back of the training field. Looks good. We'll put it to good use soon enough. For now, we just need to talk in your mindscape away from any possible distraction. It's time for you to fix up this shithole, and then we will have a serious discussion about some information you need to know. Kurama spoke her intentions. Naruto nodded his head in affirmation and went over to the center of the clearing to sit down into a meditative pose. Good. Just do what I've told you, clear your mind of unnecessary thoughts, and focus on a small tugging you should be feeling within your abdomen. Visualize yourself grabbing onto that sensation like a rope. You should be pulled in here with me after that. The fox instructed. Naruto quickly followed the instructions and, after a few long minutes, he began to feel the tugging. He imagined himself grabbing onto that with his imaginary hands. In the next instant, he was being pulled in within himself. He opened his eyes to find himself in the room he shared with Kurama the night they met. He noted the massive fox, still in the same position that he left her. She was looking down at him with her crimson eyes, her expression impassive. He had to admit he was awed with her impressive size and presence before him. She looked truly majestic. That's flattering. Kurama snorted slightly with a smirk. Naruto facepalmed hard for having forgotten she could read his mind anytime, and put on a sheepish grin with chuckle. It's true anyway. So let's get started on changing this place. I can't believe this is what my mind looks like now. He remarked with a scowl as he glanced around the room. When left alone, it reflects the acclamation of all the experiences you've had in your life up until now. Since you have experienced mostly negative events and emotions until recently, this is how this place ended up looking like this. I should inform you this mindscape was in a much worse shape until just before you began making friends and experiencing more positive events. It's hard to believe, but conditions here definitely did improve significantly since then. The fox explained calmly before moving on. Go ahead, imagine up what we've discussed earlier. Just concentrate hard enough and this mindscape will obey your will. Naruto nodded before clapping his hands together in a snake seal, his fingers intertwined tightly as he seemed to pray. After a moment, there was a loud rumble and Kurama noted her side of the room beginning to crumble as the walls cracked and fell apart in large pieces. The walls then all collapsed away to reveal a beautiful and majestic green forest hidden behind them with sunlight shining down in bright beams through the tight canopy high above. The trees were so tall and gigantic that Kurama looked like a normal-sized fox relative to the size of one of these trunks. Glancing through the bars, the fox saw the area around Naruto begin to rapidly spout lush grass in large patches while the walls on his side of the bars crumbled away as well. Revealing an enormous plain stretching as far as her crimson eyes could see, broken up only by a sparkling blue river running through it in the distance. Kurama had to admit she was very impressed at the scope of this boy's imagination. He was trying his best to make her very comfortable here in this seal and she appreciated that. The only thing that remained of the old room was the giant iron bars sitting between the fox and the boy. Even with the walls crumbling away, the bars just stretched far into the distance in both directions, and they disappeared high up into the sky, never revealing how truly tall they were. Naruto stepped up to the obstacle and patted a hand on it. Oi, I think I can get this out of the way. I have a feeling the seal just has to be near you, and it's not really needed to keep us apart since I could have just walked through them anytime. So with that, tell me what form you'd like the seal to be. I doubt you'd want a collar. He had to pause at Kurama's angry growl at the thought of being collared like a common pet. So that's out of the question. How about a ring for one of your fingers, bracelet for your wrist, or something for your tails? An earring. Anything you can think of, I'll try to change these bars into that. Just a ring for one of my fingers will suffice. The fox threw that out after a moment's thought. The blonde nodded, before beginning to concentrate hard on the bars. After a long moment of silence, a loud rumbling was heard when the bars seemed to be slowly twisting and shrinking into itself. After several minutes of concentrating, the bars were finally compressed into one giant lumpy ball of steel. A loud screeching sound emitted from the lump as Naruto grunted with some visible effort to concentrate on reshaping the seal into something wearable. It was several minutes of adjustments and nearly popped blood vessels before the duo finally saw a simple ring dull gray in color emerge from the shaping process. It was now floating in midair between the two of them, and Naruto seemed to be thinking with squinted eyes and a hand on his chin, as if he was staring at the ring like an artist. He suddenly snapped his fingers and, with a somewhat comedic ding, the ring instantly changed colors to now match Kurama's bright crimson fur. "How's that, huh?" The blonde chuckled, panting lightly as he was a little winded from concentrating so hard for so long. "At least it's not a collar. This will do and I will most likely forget it's even there after a few days." Kurama grumbled as she snatched the ring out of the air with her right hand and began to put it on her left hand. First she tried the index before moving on to the middle, and when that didn't fit either she tried one more finger. She was a little surprised when it fit on her left ring finger perfectly. She smirked a little and decided to tease her container about this. "Naruto-kun, how bold of you." She feigned shyness, and she somehow managed to show her blush through the bright red fur as she fluttered her eyelids. Naruto could only reply with a confused grunt of, "Huh. Single quote dot. We've only really known each other a short amount of time. For you to propose to me so suddenly." The fox continued to intensify her blush as she shyly glanced away from Naruto. The boy cried out in shock and facepalted. What the hell? When did I even say anything like that?" he yelled as he shot up and wildly flailed both of his hands in front of him, trying to deny that statement with all his effort. Kurama finally couldn't keep it all in and let an uproarious laugh escape. The boy just stood in stunned confusion as he watched a giant fox roll around on the ground laughing with her thrashing tails carelessly leaving destructive marks everywhere all over the place. "You should be more careful, boy. If you ever give any human female an accessory that only fits her ring finger, it might imply that you want to marry that female. You'll need to make sure it goes on the right, not on the left, and you will avoid awkward situations," chuckled Kurama when her laughter finally died down after some minutes. She then transferred the ring from her left hand to her right. As she looked at the boy, she smirked upon seeing Naruto red-faced with embarrassment. "That's good to know. I'll be careful about that from now on," he mumbled quietly with a bashful expression. "All right, Naruto. Time to have the talk. Have a seat somewhere comfortable since this is going to be long," she requested with all pretense of the previous joke gone. Naruto straightened up and glanced around to see a particularly nice patch of soft grass, so he walked over there to sit down on it cross-legged. Kurama just laid down in front of the blonde, her arms crossed under her raised head as she stared down her muzzle at him. She cleared her voice. "Naruto, this isn't going to be easy for you to hear, so I'm going to just say it all quickly. You need to know this now so any enemy wouldn't use this information to surprise you and distract you during important moments. Now, I know whom your parents were. I also know that old fart is keeping this hidden from you, because I saw him there when I was sealed into you by your father with the help of your mother." She began with a neutral tone with her crimson gaze locked on the boy's blue eyes. Naruto opened them wide in surprise and confusion. What? Why would Hokage Gigi hide this? Wait a minute. You said my father sealed you into me. The only one who did that is, oh my Kami. It was him, wasn't it? The blonde boy mumbled in shock. That's right. The fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, was your father. Kurama replied evenly, her expression still blank as she continued to stare down at her suddenly overwhelmed container. It took him a long moment to process this information before he spoke up softly. "So, I finally find out who my father is. I've always been desperate to know who my parents were, and it turns out my own father's the one who sealed you into me. No offense to you, but he just made me the object of an entire village's hatred and left me all alone to deal with it." Kurama just shrugged, expecting some negative reactions at the news. "Sounds like a fantastic father," he muttered disgruntledly. The demon fox's eyes narrowed at her container's disrespect but allowed him to continue. "Kurama, my mother. Who was she? She was my previous container before you. I was transferred from my first container, who was her distant relative, and then sealed into her for about 10 years until that night. Her name was Uzumaki Kushina," she replied with a slightly downcast expression at the memory of her previous containers. "They weren't close, but they never mistreated her either. So, she was alive and there as she helped seal you into me." Naruto was hoping for a possibility that she could be out there and around. His tenant's shake of head dismissed that. She was dying. That masked bastard took advantage of your mother's greatest moment of weakness as a female container, childbirth. After your birth, he immediately attacked and snatched her away from your father. He then used the Sharingan on me to assert control and ripped me out of her. No Jinchuriki is supposed to survive having their Biju forcefully extracted. It was only a matter of time for your mother. Kurama had to pause to allow her host to process this, since she knew he was doing his best to hold back the tears. She then allowed an admiring grin. It was actually amazing she had enough will and strength to live and stand up after that, if only for a little while longer. She used her last remaining strength to hold me down long enough for your father to complete his sealing ritual that bounded me to you. She finally finished and Naruto was processing everything slowly as his eyes began to shed tears. His expression was now turning into despair. They hate me. Is that why they sealed you in me and left me? Naruto's downward spiral into depression was violently interrupted as the great fox's right hand shot out and roughly pinned him to the ground with it. He cried out in discomfort as the hand pressed down a little with Kurama leaning over the only uncovered part of the boy, his head. She bared her sharp teeth with a low growl just several meters above. Naruto gulped loudly and kept very still. Listen well, Uzumaki Naruto, for I will only say this once. I have a very poor view of humans in general, so believe me when I say my praise of the few rare individuals I have known personally are not given out lightly. Your father and mother were some of the most honorable people I have come across in my long life. They were well respected, loved by many, and they were looking forward to your birth. Kurama suddenly looked annoyed as a memory came to her. All I ever felt from inside your mother since the day she found out she was pregnant with you was nothing but love and happiness. It was actually pretty sickening after a while. Despite the situation, Naruto had to sweat drop at his tenant's comment. The fox continued anyway. They wanted to be your parents and raise you, before that blasted man fucked everything up. The only reason they decided to seal me into you was because I overheard them stating they believed in you and that they hoped you and I would become partners, even friends one day to keep the village and the world safe. I can state with no doubt, and you'd better believe this, that they truly loved you and only left you alone in this harsh life because they had no choice but to believe in their son. Did you get all of that into the thick head of yours now? She quietly growled out, her expression deadly serious as she narrowed her crimson eyes at the boy pinned under her hand. After Naruto took everything in, he slowly nodded his head with somewhat happy tears flowing out now. The fox let out an annoyed sigh and removed her hand, freeing the boy. An uncomfortable silence settled between the crying boy and the giant fox as he continued to let out some raw emotions at finally finding out who his parents were. It seemed like hours before Naruto wiped at his wet cheeks and finally looked up at his tenant. Hokage Gigi never told me. Why'd he hide this from me? If everyone knew, the villagers might have treated me better. The blonde muttered with some anger in his tone for his surrogate grandfather. Kurama shrugged her shoulders. If I have to guess, he was protecting you. Recall what you read about the fourth the other day. She ordered of her new student. The fourth, Naruto paused for a moment before continuing. My father was considered the strongest Hokage since the first. He was known all over the world as the Yellow Flash, due to his improvements on and use of the second's Hiraishin teleportation jutsu in combination with his own personal jutsu, the Rasengan. Dad was particularly famous for killing you and single-handedly destroying half of Iwagakure's shinobi force in just a few minutes of battle in the Third Great War. Kumo didn't like him much either. He raised his eyebrows as he summarized what he learned. With all that Dad's done, his enemies would be frothing at the mouth if they ever heard he had a son and would do anything possible to kill me to prevent another Yellow Flash. Naruto concluded as if he uncovered a very elusive clue in a crime investigation. That's most likely why the old fart hid it from you and everyone else. It wasn't just to protect you but the village as well. The old Earth fossil likely would have his assassins march onto Konoha and comb over it to find you if he ever heard even a ghost of any rumor about a son having been born and is alive today. That's why you should keep quiet about your parentage for the time being. Kurama narrowed her eyes, not taking a no for an answer. Her host slowly nodded and she knew the reason for his reluctance. Trust me, boy. You may think your life might have been better off if everyone knew and treated you better, but is that really true? Think about this. Do you honestly believe you would be happy if everyone became your friend, only because of your famous parents, and they just handed you everything you ever wanted on a platter? It would be very difficult for you to get recognition for your own hard work and accomplishments. She pointed out to her container. No, I can't really imagine myself enjoying that kind of life. Sure, my early years were shitty, but I've been happy to have made good friends lately, and I can't imagine changing that now. Naruto gave a sad smile to his sensei. Thanks for knocking some sense into me, Kurama. The fox just nodded her head and laid it on her crossed arms, apparently finished with her revelations. Is it alright if you told me about all you remembered about my parents? Naruto nervously asked of the fox. She just gave a shrug. Sure. We have some time. Kurama replied with a lazy smirk before continuing on to regale the boy with tales of what she had seen from inside his mother. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys liked it. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like for more what ifs and support the author. See you guys in the next video.